Hello. That was like a very dramatic opening. I'm using this new streaming service and they have these like set graphics, and that was very dramatic. It kind of felt like you were about to see like a TED Talk or something. This is very exciting. Hey y'all, how's it going? I'm Emily. I would love for you to say hi in the chat. I would love for you to tell me that you're here. I see people are here, and that's super exciting. Tell me hi in the chat and tell me like why you're here. Are you a student? Are you a teacher? Do you have specific questions that you're hoping to get answered? For those of you joining in just like fresh, I'm Emily. I am an AP World History teacher in Austin, Texas, and I'm the creator of Antisocial Studies. So I have a podcast, a YouTube channel, Instagram and TikTok, and I just love to teach people about history, and I want them to learn about it better. And right around this time of the year for the next 2 months, I get really crazy with AP exams. So anyway, hey everybody, I'm super excited. Sorry, I'm looking at like the chat on my phone. So when I'm looking down, I'm not being rude. I'm looking at y'all. Hi. So anyway, hey everyone, AP World from New York. Hey Tracy, that's very exciting. Cool, 90% on the MCQ. That's great. You only need like a 70% on the AP exam, so that's exciting. So here's the deal. I got a lot of great questions. I got a lot of really good questions on Instagram and TikTok from students, and a lot of them were about the AP exam itself, and I think that's a great place to start. So we're going to start today. I'm going to go from 8 to 9 for an hour. But I'm going to be doing this every Wednesday. So every single Wednesday from now until the AP exam, I'll be going live right here on my YouTube channel. So if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed, and make sure that you're following me on Instagram and TikTok, because that's where I post kind of my daily review videos and that sort of thing. But I thought for tonight, like the best place to start is the exam. Like, what is the exam? What does it look like? And then whatever time we have left, I'm down. I'm down to just like answer as many questions as you can. If you have a test coming up tomorrow on Unit 7, let's talk about Unit 7. But first, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about the test, because there's been so much like changes and misinformation and stuff, and it's different from last year, and it's different from the year before that because the whole course changed. And so I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay. Hey everyone, again, I'm looking at my chat on my phone. Hey, Mr. Langle. Hi. I'm so excited that it's been helpful for you. So, all right, cool. Not stressed about that. You're stressed about the LEQ and the DBQ. Don't be. I promise by the end of these next few weeks, I will convince you that the writing portions are so much better than the multiple choice. The multiple choice, there's only so much you can do. Okay, let me start to just share my screen, because I compiled, a lot of you had really great questions, and I'm like a type A at heart, and I wanted to make sure that I was organized. And so, I want my head to be bigger. Okay. And so I made a Word document for you. Here's what I'll tell you right now. I'm going to be posting this Word document on my website. So my website is antisocialstudies.org. It's right here. If you go there right now, you'll see a lot. If you're a teacher, you'll see a lot of lesson plans and ideas for that sort of thing. And if you're a student, there's a page all about the AP exam. So if I mention like a review resource or something, normally it's posted there or linked there. And I'll be posting this document too. This is where I just kind of compiled all the questions that I was getting. So these are all my other handles. And really, let's just dive in. What's the AP exam? When's it going to be? That's the first part of this that's really important, because with COVID, this is all very strange. So I just want to make sure that we're really clear that there are 3 different AP exams, and your school / your teacher is kind of up to them to decide which one of these you're going to take. And so there's the original date and test, which is May 10th. That's going to be like you're in your school, you're taking it on paper. There's the old school test, which we're all very familiar with. And by we, I mean teachers, right? But the other 2, the College Board has added 2 more tests because of COVID, where schools or districts or individual teachers, it kind of just depends on how your school works, can choose to have you take one of those tests, which are going to be later. And so there's May 20th and then June 3rd. And these are both going to be what we call digital exams. We're not saying online. We're not saying online, because technically they're not online. Technically, like last year, it was straight up online. Kids could use the internet. I'll tell you right now, it wasn't that much of a help. But this year, they're not online. It's digital, because the College Board has developed some sort of system where You will be accessing the test on a computer, but then it's going to like lock you out of everything else to where you can only be working on the test. And so it's not the same thing as just like, you're not going to just go into your browser and start working on the AP exam. And so there are 3 different dates. If you do not know which one you're taking, I just ask your teacher, because they are actually different tests. They look just slightly different depending on whether you're taking the one on paper, Admin 1, the first one, or whether you're taking one of the digital tests, Admin 2 or 3. So with that, how do they look differently? And so let me just like zoom in as much as possible to make this as big as it can possibly go. So really, the tests are almost identical, except for one section. And so if you are taking the test, sorry, I'm like scrolling through, go over the Cold War. You're already on the Cold War? Lisa, dang, tell your teacher, good job. You're already in the Cold War. I just started that today. Okay, sorry. So the tests are almost identical, right? On both tests, you still have multiple choice. You have 55 multiple choice in 50 minutes. I promise you that's plenty of time. Really, like the way these multiple choice questions work, if you can't figure it out in 2 or 3 minutes, you're not going to figure it out. And that sounds really mean, and it's not. It's just like some of these questions are really hard, and like you are not meant to get every single one of them right. And so really, I think it's actually nice that they give you a very limited amount of time, because if anything, I've seen students like have the right answer and then they have too much time to go back and think about it, and they go and like change their answer at the very end. So you have 55 multiple choice in 55 minutes. That's a little less than half of your test. Again, I've been saying this before, but like, if nothing else, if y'all walk away from tonight with nothing else, please know that like your understanding of what is a good score on a test should go out the window. Like no one's getting a 100 on this test. It kind of doesn't exist. Like 2 years ago, one student got a 100%, meaning they got every single possible point on the test. And teachers around the world like freaked out. They were like, oh my God, did you hear this person got a 100%? Like that's out of tens and tens and tens of thousands of students. One student got a perfect score. And so that, for some students, that stresses them out. It shouldn't. It actually should make you feel better. What this means is that this test is realistic and they understand that there are going to be some questions that you just don't know. And that's totally fine. So what I tell my students is like, if on the different parts of the test, if you're averaging a B, then, oh man, you're great, right? Like you're great. If you're averaging a B, if out of 50, oh God, I'm going to make myself do math. Out of 55 multiple choice questions, if you're averaging like whatever 80% of that would be, 38, I don't know. If you're averaging what would be like 80% or higher, then you are in good company. That's awesome. If on the DBQ out of a 7 points, you're getting a 5 out of 7, that's amazing. And so if you're still stuck in this idea that like you need a 100% to be good, or you need an A+ to be good, or if you're still stuck in the idea of saying, well, the DBQ's out of 7, and if I get a 5 out of 7, 5 divided by 7 is a really low score. Like that's just not the way this test works. And so just keep that in mind. That if anything, your teachers, and I do the same thing, like I grade my students harder during the school year than the AP exam does. Because it's like it's like swimmers. You have hairy arms, and then right before the meet, you shave your arms and then you go way faster. That was a weird analogy, but you know what I mean? Like you want to train and have it be harder than on the day of like the test or the meet or whatever. But also, I mean, my expectations for a student's essay on World War I, if we've just learned about World War I and they knew the essay was going to be about World War I, then like I expect it to be a way better essay. But what's cool about the AP exam is that everyone grading this test is like me. I'm a grader, right? So if you are feeling really anxious about the test, if you're feeling really nervous about it, when you're doing the test, just picture me grading it. I'm a very nice, bubbly person, right? I love Parks and Rec. Like I'm a human being, and so are all the other graders. And we grade it knowing that like, we don't expect you to know every single thing about world history. That's insane. Okay, sorry, that was a long tangent, but it's important, right? So you have 55 multiple choice. Both tests have one SAQ section. short answer question, which is going to be 3 SAQ sets, right? So they've made this as confusing as possible, but right, you're going to get like a little stimulus, some sort of picture, document, whatever, and then you'll get like A, B, and C. That's 1 SAQ. So you have 3 of those. So if you think of the little mini questions, you have 9, 3 times 3. Honestly, the hardest part about the short answer questions is just the time. That's the hardest part, is that students just run out of time. They spend they like write a whole paragraph or a whole essay for the first few questions, and then they run out of time. And so one of the things that I'll do my best to do on YouTube, but also that you should be practicing, is how to answer those as efficiently as possible. And I'll try to talk about that tonight if I can. Both tests have a DBQ. You cannot escape the DBQ. It's inescapable. And I'm okay with that. As a person who has a master's degree in history, I will say the DBQ is like the most legitimate, like that's what historians actually do. I actually really like the DBQ. I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I'm all in. The only thing that's different, so if you are taking the first administration on May 10th, if you're taking the in-paper exam at your school, on-paper exam in your school, you will have an LEQ, a long essay question, which just means it's just like an essay. It's an essay without any documents. If you're taking any of the other tests, the digital tests, instead of 1 essay, you will have 2 more SAQs. That's really the only substantial difference. And so the reason is because they've said like the LEQ is just easier to cheat on. I guess that's true, right? I guess it's true that like you could more easily just like, I don't really know. But so they've just said that the LEQ seems to be the one that's the easiest to cheat on if you're on your computer. And so they've replaced it with 2 more SAQs. The only other big difference between the 2 tests, if you're taking the test digitally on a computer, on the multiple choice section, you cannot go back and forth. So you can't skip around. That is like the biggest drawback. Because frankly, I like the digital test better. I think SAQs are better than 1 long essay. So the big drawback is that on those multiple choice, as of right now, if you're taking the test digitally, you can't jump around. Like once you answer a question, you've answered it and you've locked it in and now you move forward. Now, I will just say as a teacher, I think that's fine because like I said before, if anything, I have more students that like screw themselves up by going back and changing right answers. But I know that psychologically that stresses a lot of us out. A lot of us really like to be able to have like the whole test and go back and check our answers. And so that whole thing is a little bit scary. And so we're going to do our best. I'm going to try to, I don't know if I can create, I'll try to maybe on a Google form or something create, like I'm hoping that the College Board will make some sort of practice test where you can practice in that way, where you can't move around. Okay, I'm checking the comments. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. These are all great. A lot of these are like asking about imperialism. You're fine. I just started the 20th century. It's okay. Good counter argument. You don't actually need one. No, like you do for a good essay, you need a counter argument, but for the AP exam, you don't. So this is the other thing I want to say before I keep going. I'm an AP World History teacher. I am a loyal history teacher to the bone. Like if it's between you and your history teacher, I'm with your history teacher every single time. So I want to be really clear here. I'm giving you advice on how to pass a very specific standardized test, which in a lot of ways is kind of silly. Like this test is not a great judge of like whether you know history or whatever. But okay, your teacher is trying to teach you how to be like a good historian. And so I just want to be really clear that, you know, any advice I give you over the next few months is specific to the test. So if I say like, you actually don't have to have a counter argument because you don't, I just mean, according to the AP exam, there's no part of the rubric that's like, you had an effective counter argument. Now, again, as someone with a master's degree in history, it's good to acknowledge your potential counter arguments when you're writing, but on the AP exam, you don't need it. Same thing with like a conclusion. You don't need a conclusion. You can stop your essay mid-sentence. Like literally mid-sentence. We don't care. But like, that's not great. You know what I mean? You shouldn't turn in a book to your publisher like mid-paragraph. So the point is your teacher is smarter than me. Your teacher is better than me. Your teacher is trying to teach you what they know that you need to know to be like a well-rounded human being. I am a face on the screen that's telling you how to pass a very specific test. So just make sure we can separate those two things. All right, history teachers, I see you. So, Another question that I got is what units make up the test and which are the most important? And I'm realizing now that this little screenshot I made, gosh, y'all, Google Documents and Word is just like, it's like they thought, how can I make a thing that is so unuser friendly? So let me try to pull this up right here. So I did get one or two slightly worrying questions. I say this with love, but I got one or two questions about like, how much is ancient history going to be on the test? And I was like, uh-oh, not at all. So if you've not gotten the memo, this test starts in the year 1200. So like it's in the, this course starts in the middle of the Middle Ages. So, you know, your school might have they might have forced your teacher to teach ancient history. They might have forced them to teach Rome and the Han Dynasty and that sort of thing, because, you know, they're like, well, they need to learn everything. But the test and the AP part of the course only starts in the year 1200. So there are 9 units according to the College Board. Your teacher might have reorganized it. That's all totally fine. It's the same information. But according to the College Board, there's 9 units. And I will just say the meat of the course is units 3 through 6. So if you are trying to figure out strategically like how much time you should spend on different units, from 1450 to 1900 is where you should be spending most of your time when you're studying. So it's kind of like a little bell curve, right? The first units, like units 1 and 2 are, you know, like 1/5 of the test. And so, you know, Silk Road, Song Dynasty, Mongols, that sort of thing. You need to know it, but it's not quite as much. But then like discovery of the Americas, gunpowder empires, transatlantic slave trade, Enlightenment, revolutions, imperialism. That's sort of the heart of the course. And so out of 9 units, if you're like, I only have the brain space to cover 4, then cover units 3 through 6. And then units 7 through 9, the whole 20th century, I'll just tell you right now, like, don't worry about unit 9. I've put out a 3-part series on unit 9 on my YouTube channel, and legit, I think I'm just going to make my students go watch those, which makes me feel real gross, but like whatever. Like, I just think the College Board would have to be extra mean to give you like a DBQ on unit 9, because they just know that a lot of teachers aren't going to make it there. I'm barely going to make it there. And I think I'm like pretty good at teaching AP World. So again, if you're worried about the 20th century, out of these last 3 units, if your teachers, like I see a lot of you in the chat are like, oh no, like I'm only in imperialism or, you know, whatever, then that's okay. Honestly, of these last 3 units, unit 8 is the most important. And so my favorite review resources are like old school. I would go to a bookstore. Okay, a bookstore is a place. It's a building where they sell books made of paper. And you can go get a test prep book, get an AP World History Modern test prep book. Just make sure it's modern, make sure it's from the new course. And I think those are legitimately some of the best resources, because they'll have like unit reviews that are like short and easier to understand. And so again, if you're worried, like if your teacher, I see some of you in the chat are like, my teacher's brand new, like she's struggling, she's still in, you know, 1500 or whatever. 1, I've been there. Please be kind to that teacher. I've been that teacher. But 2, it's okay, right? Pick up a review book and you can just then start, like, as you're learning the earlier stuff, wherever you are, you can then kind of start reviewing the later stuff. Because the good news is the last few units, units 7, 8, and 9 are the easiest to learn because they're modern. Like it's easier for us to understand. We don't have to like really dig deep to figure out World War II. We've all seen the Tom Hanks movie, right? And so if you're worried that your teacher is not going to get through the content by the test, 1, if they don't get to unit 9, don't worry. That's fine, really. But if you're worried they're not going to get to unit 7 or 8, pick up a test prep book, Princeton Review, Barron's, like it literally doesn't matter, and just start reading their unit overviews so that you get the big picture. Okay, again, scrolling through this. I'm using this new like streaming thing and it's not popping up here. So this is very annoying. Hey, thanks, Keith. I appreciate it. Okay, people are worried because they're like, oh no, we didn't talk about the Song Dynasty, or we didn't talk about the Abbasids of Dar al-Islam. One, that's crazy, but two, that's okay. So I have done content reviews for you. Also, if you haven't heard of just a lovely man named Steve Heimler, then like you need to know about Steve Heimler. Heimler's history on YouTube is just a godsend. And so again, if you are either like teaching yourself AP World, you're a little worried like maybe my teacher didn't cover certain things, I mean, you just go now. And one video a day, you watch Heimler's history. He does a really amazing job of like covering the big picture and giving you some details. And then you can hop over to like my TikTok account. So on TikTok, starting on Monday, I started posting one video a day. And I'm legitimately, I started at 1,200 and I'm going through every single unit. And so I started doing like society. My next video that's going to post tomorrow is about Dar al-Islam and the Abbasids. So like, if you have not covered that, then find the resources that are out there. Heimler's history is one, anti-social studies is another, Freemanpedia is another great one. There are a lot of really great teachers out there making content to help you and to help your teachers cover their bases, because it's really an impossible task to tell a teacher, like, you should teach your kids the whole history of the planet. That's freaking insanity. And so it is natural that they skip some things. And so if you're worried about that, come find us and we'll kind of fill in those gaps. All right. A few other questions I got on Instagram and TikTok. How to start studying. Okay. This one I'm going to spend a little bit of time on. So I'm going to make this as big as possible. What do we think? Like 26? Let's go 26. Whoa. That was very exciting. Okay. I'm going to do a little smaller. That's a little aggressive. I'm like, chill out. Okay. Here is like the most helpful thing I can tell you about studying for an AP history test is that you need to start from the top and work your way down. And here's what I mean by that. You want to start with big, broad, vague statements and developments and work your way down to where the last thing you're learning is like a specific event. And here's what I'll just say before I explain that. Every year, right, I've taught AP World History for over 10 years. When we have our first test, and I give them like, okay, here's kind of your review. Here's some stuff you need to know. And I'm like, okay, we have a data review. The first thing most students do is they get out flashcards or they pull up Quizlet. And they start just putting in the key terms with their definitions into their flashcards. And I'm like, that's actually the opposite of what you should be doing. Because if you are just memorizing individual facts with no context, with no place to put them, you're going to forget them very quickly. I could get really nerdy. I kind of want to get really nerdy. This comes from like a theory from the ancient Romans about memory. Y'all, I'm an ultra history nerd. But the idea is that, like, to learn how to remember different facts. I've gotten so many questions from people who are like, I'm just bad at memorizing. I can't memorize all these dates. One, dates don't matter. You don't need to memorize dates for the test. You need to know chronology. You need to know the order of events, right? You need to know that, like, World War II happened, then the Great Depression, then World War II. But you don't need to know the years when those things happened. But if I have a bad memory too. Like, I'm actually really bad at memorizing specific dates, specific names, whatever. And so instead, what you need is you need to create space in your brain to like organize those specific facts so that they'll stick for longer. And so what you should do is like, it's 3 steps. Let's say you go, okay, this week, I'm going to study Unit 1. I'm going to go back through Unit 1. The first thing you should do is figure out what are like the, 3 to 6 main developments of Unit 1. Like, what are the super big picture, can apply to a lot of different regions, trends of Unit 1. And you know where you should go for that. You can go to my intro videos on YouTube. So on this YouTube channel, I do like a Unit 1 intro video where I say, here are some big questions you should be able to answer by the end of this unit. But also, and here's like the thing that it amazes me that more AP students don't know about. It's called the CED. If you haven't already, you should just Google AP World Course and Exam Description. AP World CED. This is a PDF. It's free. It's open. This is not cheating. This is something the College Board gives. It is for teachers and for students to say, hey, teachers, here's what you need to teach your kids. Now, this isn't like the answer key. It doesn't tell you everything that you need to know, but this is what teachers get to understand, like, what are the important things that I need to know? Now, you might notice, like, this PDF is 258 pages long, and you're like, no, thank you, Emily. Don't worry. There's a thing called Control F. You should hit Control F to search in this document, and it's now not letting me do that. There it is. And start with like 1.1, Unit 1, Topic 1, and go down to a page that's going to look like this. And as you scroll, you will see, okay, in Unit 1, it gives you some sample lesson plans. You're not a teacher. You don't need to worry about that. And you're going to get to a page that looks like this. Developments in East Asia from 1200 to 1450. That's 1.1. Unit 1, Topic 1. That's what you need to know. And you'll scroll on. You should skip a lot of this stuff. You'll get to this. It says the learning objective. Here's the broad thing that you as a student need to know how to do. You need to know how to explain the systems of government employed by Chinese dynasties and how they developed over time. And you're like, what does that mean? Well, hello. Hop over to the historical developments, and they're going to give you a little bit more specifics. Empires and states in Afro-Eurasia and the Americas demonstrated continuity, innovation, diversity in the 13th century. That's like a throwaway sentence, whatever. This included the Song dynasty of China. They have name-checked a specific dynasty, which means like, okay, Emily, you need to know that thing. I need to know what the Song dynasty was, which utilized traditional methods of Confucianism and an imperial bureaucracy to maintain and justify its rule. And so what this statement has said is that, hey, when you're walking to the AP exam in May, you need to understand that, like, China has these constant forms of government control that they're using over time. And one of them is Confucianism, which includes a bureaucracy. Now, if you don't know what that means, then you need to go further. If you're like, what is Confucianism? Then you need to dive deeper into that. If when they say Confucian bureaucracy, you don't immediately go like, oh, right, the civil service exams and the scholar gentry and that sort of thing. Okay, then you need to go another level of depth to like make sure you actually understand what that means. But if you read that sentence and you're like, yeah, I remember that, the Song, Confucian, bureaucracy, civil service, like filial piety, I remember all that stuff. Great. You can check this off the list and be like, I'm good with that. And then keep on moving, right? And it'll tell you other things. So in some of them, they'll give you off to the right specific examples that you might use. So you might see something that's like, hey, they also want you to be able to explain the effects of Chinese cultural traditions on East Asia over time. And you're like, well, what does that mean? We'll hop over here. And it says, Chinese cultural traditions continued and they influenced their neighboring regions. Okay, so if you read that one sentence, you would need to be able to tell me more specifically, what are Chinese cultural traditions? So Confucianism, for example, and what neighboring regions did they influence? So then you'd go, all right, well, Confucianism spread. Korea, for example, took Confucianism, but they got rid of the whole, like, anyone can join the bureaucracy. It was only the aristocracy. So they kind of changed it, right? And over here, they give you some specific examples. They say, are you not sure what cultural traditions are in China? Well, filial piety, Neo-Confucianism, respect for and deference from women, Chinese literary and scholarly traditions, right? So they're giving you some ideas to get started. Okay, this is not an answer key. This doesn't mean like, oh, I'll just read this document and know everything. But this is your guide, right? If you're stepping in and going, I'm going to review Unit 1 and I don't know where to start, you should pull up this PDF and this is where you should start. And you could almost see it as a checklist. But the point that I'm saying is like, it's way more important that you understand the broader development that like Chinese culture is influencing a lot of East Asian societies in the early time periods, in the post-classical era. That's the most important thing for you to know. And then for the test, yeah, you should be able to name 1 or 2 examples of that. But the point is, if you just start with the example, if you just start with a flashcard that's like Korean aristocracy, and like it's meaningless. You're going to go, what does this matter? What do I care about this? But if instead you say, all right, I have my notes and I have this statement at the top, Chinese culture spreads to regions in East Asia. That's my big thing. Now I'm going to drill down and say, what regions? Korea. Okay, now it goes to Korea. And an example would be Confucianism. They develop a Confucian government. And then I might put a little star and be like, but there's one thing they don't do. They limit the bureaucracy to the aristocracy, people who like owned land and were sort of noble, right? So that's a change they made. And then that's it. And then you move on. That's the level of depth that you need, right? The AP exam is not going to ask you to write an essay describing the Korean aristocracy. They're not. What's really cool about this document, the CED, is that you can basically predict your writing questions, right? I mean, you can predict that you could get a short answer question that would say, identify and explain one effect of Chinese cultural traditions on East Asia from 1200 to 1450, right? Like you could just reword the learning objective and it becomes a short answer question. Or you could reword like a bigger learning objective. And in fact, what you should do is like at the bottom of each unit, whatever the last topic is, so we have 1.3, 1.4, blah, 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 we're gonna skip through. Whatever the last topic is, you should read that comparison. And it says, explain the similarities and differences in the processes of state formation from 1200 to 1450. Hey, that's an essay. That's an essay prompt, right? They tell you like the last topic. So if you have the AMSCO book, you know, you might notice that like you get really excited when you get to the end of a unit and you get to like, you know, 3.6 because it's a lot easier. It's a lot shorter. It's just sort of summing up all the things you already knew. That's because that very last topic is the College Board telling you like, let's zoom out. Here's the big idea, the things I really want you to know. And if you want to try to predict like what LEQ might they ask me from unit 1, or what might be part of the DBQ for unit 1, if there is one, go to the very last topic, whichever the last one is in that unit before the next unit starts, and read this learning objective. And you very might could get an LEQ that would be like, evaluate the extent to which processes of state formation were similar from 1200 to 1450. Like if you have looked at this document, all the wording and the terminology on the AP exam is going to be very familiar, right? You're going to read the questions and go, oh, I know actually exactly where they got that from. And I looked at that thing, right? So this is my #1 favorite review resource because it's the teacher guide. It's telling you up front, like, this is what we need you to know. Okay. So again, you literally just go into Google and type AP World CED. And it's like the first PDF that opens up. And this is not cheating. This is not like a teacher's key that I'm giving you. This is on the website where you can get it. Okay, I'm going to scroll through the chat for just a second and make sure I'm not missing things. Yes, Lena, I know, right? Like, how did y'all not know about this? It amazes me that more teachers don't just tell you about this. And if I'm being honest, I think it's not that they're like hiding it from you. It's like, this just doesn't seem like something y'all would be interested in. And frankly, if your teachers gave you the CED in August, you'd be like, get me out of here. Like, no. But now that you're getting ready for the test, it is such a useful document for you to sort of like, if you're one of those people that really struggles to figure out like what's important here, like I'm reading all this stuff in the textbook, but I can't figure out what's important. You can go look at the CED and it'll help you kind of summarize, okay, here's the thing I should be focusing on. And now I'll go back into my textbook and like find that information. Okay. Gina, Heimler's Sister Review, like it a lot. I love Heimler's Sister Review. I have Steve Heimler's number in my cell phone. That's a weird flex, but I feel like it's a flex that will work in this environment. He's wonderful. Like he's it. He's the John Green of AP history classes. So you should be, if you're hopping around between me and Heimler and Freeman, Marco Learning is a company that does a really great job. I do reviews for them too. Like if you're hopping around between us and your teacher and your own review book, I mean, that's great. That's it, right? Okay. Should you remember specific? So I'm looking at like Tracy's question in the chat. That's like, it's from a little bit ago, but it's like, okay, what about if you're talking about like the Industrial Revolution? Do we need to memorize like specific technology, like Robert Fulton's steamship? You don't need to remember the name Robert Fulton, but the point is like, yeah, you would want to know the steamship, but that's where you end. Like, you don't need to know how a steamship works. You don't need to know in what year the steamship was invented. You don't need to know like in what city it was invented. You just need to know that the steamship is a great example of an early technology that's going to like spur this industrial revolution, right? Steam power then leads to like the steamship and then like railroads and that sort of thing. So again, like if it's whether in your textbook, if it's a bold word in the textbook, or if your teacher gives you like key terms, if it's a specific event, the point is that should be the end. That should be the last thing you get to. And you should only care about it in relation to these bigger themes. And so let's say you're thinking about something like in Unit 1 and 2, the House of Wisdom in Dar al-Islam. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I did a YouTube video about it. But so like if you're like, okay, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, in the Abbasid Caliphate, like you don't need to know where, like specifically where it was. You don't need to know how long it lasted. You don't need to know necessarily what books were in there. You don't need to know what scholars were in there, although it could be cool if you knew that. What you need to know is, what is the House of Wisdom an illustrative example of? So you want to work backwards and like zoom out. The House of Wisdom is a great example of the Abbasid Caliphate being a government that is actively promoting knowledge and innovation and education. That's what you need to know about the House of Wisdom. So if anything, if you get a specific thing, like if you're like, oh, the Taiping Rebellion in China, don't go more specific, go broader. What is the Taiping Rebellion a good illustrative example of? Okay, it is a good example of like peasants, especially, and especially ethnic minorities, believing that the Qing, the Manchu, have lost the mandate of heaven. And that's partly because of this bigger trend of like chaos and instability in the Qing dynasty in the 1800s because of the Opium Wars and that sort of thing. And so again, the Taiping Rebellion, you don't need to be memorizing, like, here's how many soldiers there were, and here's blah, blah, blah. You just need to be able to know, like, okay, if I was trying to argue that China was becoming increasingly unstable in the 1800s, I could throw out the Taiping Rebellion as an example of that. And like, you don't need to go in any more detail, as long as you can make it clear why the Taiping Rebellion proves it was unstable. Millions of people were rebelling against the government and ultimately died in this civil war, right? So again, I think there's this misconception that you're somehow expected to know every single fact about world history, and that's not true. You're expected to know enough facts about world history to support an argument that you're making. Ultimately, what the AP history exams are about is like, can you make an argument about history and support it with evidence, right? So yeah, there's the multiple choice, that's sort of its own thing, but like the short answer question, the essay, the DBQ, there's not a right answer in any of those. What they're looking for is like, can you come up with an answer and then cite a specific piece of evidence to support it? And if so, then you're good. And so what's really cool about this AP history test and why it works for you is that a lot of those, especially like the LEQs, that sort of thing, the prompts are broad enough that for example, like, I don't know, Kelly could write about one thing and then Mubraka could write about something else. And they could both be right? So it's not, they're not pushing into a corner and saying like, we want everyone to tell us about this specific thing. And so again, if you're feeling really stressed and nervous about the test, don't. I promise you it works in your favor. There is no part of the test where they can take points away from you. That doesn't exist. You can only earn points. And so I got a really good question on TikTok about like, what if I get to a point and I don't know the answer to something? Just make an educated guess. I mean, there's literally nothing to lose from trying, right? Because they can't take points away. There's no such thing as negative points on the AP test, right? If you write an essay and your whole essay is like banging, it's just like so awesome. And I'm grading your essay going like, oh my gosh, you got context and a thesis and an argument. It's so amazing. And you get 6 out of 6 and I'm so happy. If you then write a conclusion that's just bonkers, like makes no sense and is just totally wrong, there's nothing I can do about it. You've already earned the 6 points on the rubric. Now, again, if your teacher is taking points off, I think that's appropriate because like you shouldn't be able to just throw in garbage at the end. But the point is that the AP exam just wants to see what you know. And so when in doubt, put it on the paper, do your best and see what happens, right? Okay. Yes, this is going to be recorded and posted on my YouTube channel after this is over. Which review book do I recommend? I have found it doesn't seem to matter. Like I kind of find as long as you're getting a review book that's for AP Modern, so you can't go find a book from 10 years ago. And as long as you find a book that has like unit summaries and practice tests, which they all seem pretty good. I mean, I think Princeton Review is like, seems pretty standard, like solid, but I haven't found one that's inherently like way better than the others. So I would just find the one that you can find at your bookstore or whatever, or I guess on Amazon, but support your local bookstores. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Barron and Princeton Review seem to be like the kind of standards. And then if you don't use AMSCO, let me find, this is my AMSCO US history book, but it's similar for world history. If your class doesn't use AMSCO, you could use AMSCO as a review book. It is like shorter. There's not any pictures really or whatever, but it is on its own. It's like the shortest possible textbook for an AP class. And it's only, you can go find it online. It's like $20 or something. So cool. All right. How should you organize your time to review this stuff? What I would suggest is that you go chronologically. And if you're taking the first administration of the test, if you're taking it on May 10th, then I think you have, 7 weeks. Is that right? I think you have like 7 weeks until the test. That might be wrong. 6 or 7. And so really, if you just say, okay, each week I'm going to review a different time period. So this first week, I'm going to go back and I'm going to my first step, if I say I'm going to review 1200 to 1450, here's the first thing I would do. I would open up this CED. Oh, I'd already opened it. That was dumb. The other thing I want to mention, and I'll show you all this right now, if this CED, this huge PDF, is a little overwhelming to you, I've simplified it for you. So on my website, I've actually made for you a simplified CED that's a little bit easier to look at. So if you go to my website, antisocialstudies.org, I think I'm like testing my internet to the limits. Okay. So you go to my website, you click AP World History, Exam Resources. You should see at the top where I've made kind of my own. I just basically retyped it because I'm insane. To make it a little bit easier to look at. I cut out kind of all the fluff. And so if you see, I say that here are the 3 things you should have to help you review for the AP exam. And the first thing is the CED. And so if you open this up, you'll see it's a PDF that you can then save. And if I was starting to review, and if I said, okay, this week I'm going to review 1200 to 1450, the first thing I would do is I would print out this CED and I would use it as a checklist. I would literally read each statement. So let me scroll to something different. Something we haven't looked at yet. I would say, let's look at Dar al-Islam. I would say, okay, as the Abbasid Caliphate fragmented, new Islamic entities emerged, including the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt and the Delhi Sultanates that were dominated by Turkic people. These states demonstrated continuity, innovation, and diversity. I would read that. And if there were any words in there that made me go, what? I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Then I would go, okay, I need to go in and review that. So if I saw Mamluk Sultanate and was like, I'm sorry, I don't remember those words at all, that's totally fine. Then you need to go into your book or your review book or whatever and like do a little bit of digging to find out what that is. So my first step on reviewing these, like on day 1 of each week, is I would skim through these statements. And if I read a statement and I went, okay, here's up here, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, the core beliefs of these religions continue to shape societies in Africa and Asia. I'd go, yeah, that seems to make sense to me. Okay, I could probably talk about that for a second. Then you could like highlight it or check it off and say, okay, I feel pretty good about that one. But again, if you get to a statement, like if you come down here and say, I don't know, like in Africa, state systems demonstrated continuity, innovation, diversity, including Great Zimbabwe. If you were like, ooh, I probably couldn't name an African state during this time period, like except, okay, Great Zimbabwe, but I don't really know much about it. Okay, then you should circle that and you should go back into your notes or go back into your textbook or go to Heimler or wherever and like, you know, study 1.5. And so I would use this CED as your review. Use it as like, you want to know like, what's the review for the test going to be? This is it. And so if you go through and use this as a checklist and say like, okay, you know what? I feel pretty good about this statement. If I was asked to like write a few sentences on it and support it with evidence, I feel good. Great. Move on with your life. Then you don't need to worry about it again. But if you read something and you're confused, or you read like a bold word or a specific piece of information and you're like, I don't remember that at all, well, then now that's your sign to go in and study it a little bit more. That's where I would start. And so then, you know, to dive deeper, there's a lot of different resources. You can use my videos, Heimler's videos. Marco Learning has a free study guide. They have free study guides for each unit. You just go to marcolearning.com and you can download them for free. So it's like each unit in 2 pages. They've given you just the main idea and the big picture. And so again, start with the broad statements. And if they make sense to you and you're like, yeah, that sparks my memory, I can remember some stuff about that where I could reference it in an essay or whatever, great. And if you come across something where you're like, whoa, I don't think my teacher covered that, or I don't remember that, well, then now is when you should pause and go into a little bit more detail. And so again, the last thing you should be doing is the most specific facts. So on that statement I looked at before from the CED that was like, you know, the state building in Africa, right? It was like, okay, there were these different states. Great Zimbabwe was one of them. Okay, well, I would want to make sure I knew like, okay, I know where Great Zimbabwe is. It's in Southern Africa. They're kind of trading gold and other resources with the different trading states. And so from there, I'd want to know what those are, the Swahili Coast, Mali, those different kingdoms. And then I would want to get one step more specific and say, what else do I know about Great Zimbabwe? Well, we know that they were a highly organized society. They built like the largest and first stone wall in sub-Saharan Africa. But we actually don't know much else about them because they collapsed and we're not really sure why. And so again, like you shouldn't have a flashcard that's like the stone wall of Great Zimbabwe. Like that's meaningless. But if you're like, hey, that's an example of innovation. Like they learned how to build, they built these huge stone walls without mortar, like without anything sticking them together, which is something the Inca did too. That's pretty cool. That's a cool specific piece of evidence. What's not going to happen is you're not going to get a multiple choice question on the test saying, which of the following civilizations built the first, you know, stone wall in sub-Saharan Africa? A, Mali. B, Great Zimbabwe. Like that doesn't exist. Right? So when you get to the specifics, when you get to a specific piece of evidence, the reason you need to know that is if you need to pull it out as a piece of evidence. You are not going to be quizzed on that. You're not going to be asked like, in what year did the 100 Years' War begin? Like that's not a thing, right? But if you wanted to talk about like nationalism in Europe developing, and then you wanted to talk about the 100 Years' War as an example of that, great. And so again, you are not expected to know everything that happened in world history. You're just not. That would be insane. You are expected to know enough that you could like make a logical argument about history and support it with some facts. So like, do not spend the next however many weeks just trying to memorize as many things from history as possible. It's way more helpful to start with these broad statements and then just gather your evidence underneath them. 1, it's preparing you for the test better. And 2, brain science, it's going to help you remember it better. Because if you just have flashcards and you're just memorizing stuff, it's going to go out of your brain. But if instead you have like a big picture idea, you're like, hey, from 1200 to 1450, a lot of states actively promoted like innovation and knowledge and education. That's your big thing that you've memorized. You just know that. Well, now you have a place to put that information. You can go like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, or like schools of architecture with the Inca, because they trained their architects. Or in the Song Dynasty, they expanded the university system. It's like now you have a place to put those things, right? You need some sort of organizing system. I like to kind of imagine your brain as like a bunch of filing cabinets, and you need a place to like store stuff. Otherwise, it's just going to get lost. Okay, I'll stop rambling now. So a few other questions that I have about the test. I got some great questions. Okay, a very common, especially in classes, a very common writing prompt, I love these writing prompts, is evaluate the extent to which. So I just want to be really clear here. That just means put it on a spectrum. That just means like there's a gray area, tell me what it is. So if you get a writing prompt in class or on the AP test that's like, someone wanted me to review some Unit 7 stuff. So let's say, evaluate the extent to which German aggression was the cause of World War II. Okay, if that's the prompt, you could answer, it 100% was the cause of World War II. German aggression and Japanese aggression was the absolute cause of World War II. And then you could explain why. Or you could argue, absolutely not. In no way was German and Japanese aggression the cause of World War II. Both of those answers are silly. Like in history, that's just not the way history works. Like it's almost never 100% or 0%. So what the AP exam really wants you to do is they want you to settle yourself somewhere in the middle. And there's no right or wrong answer as long as you can justify it. So what they want you to do is they want you to say, you know what, for the most part, like in many ways, aggression from Germany and Japan did cause World War II. You know, and then you would give some specifics because because Germany violated the Treaty of Versailles and Japan violated the kind of agreements for how to deal with China, which pushed other countries into war, right? But then you're like, but however, there's this one thing that kind of brings it over here on the spectrum. But, other states could have done more to try to prevent the war in the first place. Other states could have, tried, stopped appeasing Hitler and stopped, just punishing Japan and maybe tried to find some other way to deal with them. So, it's not entirely on Germany and Japan. It's also on these other states in the League of Nations who kind of failed to do anything. That's what that prompt means. If you get evaluate the extent to which, it just means there should be a gray area in there. It means you're just going to answer it and say, now, if you want to say, you know what, all my arguments are going to be that German and Japanese aggression is the cause, that's totally fine. You can just say overwhelmingly, German and Japanese aggression did cause World War II. And then you just have your main arguments about it. That's totally fine. Or you could say, in no way did German and Japanese aggression cause World War II. That'd be a hard argument to make, but whatever. But in general, I like these questions because used to, they would ask a prompt and they would say did German aggression cause World War II? And then you felt like you had to either say yes or no. And a lot of people were like, but I kind of want to say both. And they heard you. And so now they're asking you, evaluate the extent to which. And it's actually a really nice question once you understand what it's asking. Because what it's doing is it's giving you room to be flexible. It's giving you room to have gray area and be like, well, you know what? In this way it was, but in this other way it was different. And so, you could say militarily, the war was caused by aggression. However, politically, there was a lot of other things that the other nations could have done to try to prevent war, right? So you can sort of determine whatever your topics are going to be. It's just, if you get it, evaluate the extent to which question, it's just giving you more room to breathe and be flexible. So again, don't be intimidated by those questions. It's just allowing you more freedom to answer the question realistically instead of just picking all or nothing, right? Okay. We have 5 minutes left. And by we, I mean me. But 5 minutes left. And so I'm scrolling through, but I want you to know a few things. One, I'm going to be doing this every Wednesday. So every Wednesday from 8 to 9 is my office hours. It's office hours with Emily. You can come in, you can ask me questions. I'm going to have topics planned. So I think next week I'm going to be going over kind of units 1 and 2, but then also whatever questions y'all have. And so I'm also going to be saving this chat. So if you've been asking me a question and I haven't been able to see it and answer it, I'm going to save it. I'll either address it on one of these lives, I'll address it in a YouTube video or in an Instagram post or TikTok. So just make sure that you're following me, because I'm going to do my best to field as many of your questions as possible between now and May. So with this, oh, Connie, that's a great question. So like, is there vocabulary you can use? Yeah, you can just quantify it, right? So you could say like, even if it's as simple as like, German aggression mostly caused World War II. However, in this one way, British appeasement also was to blame. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to, the thing about the essays is like, they don't have to sound nice, right? If you've looked at the rubrics, which we'll look at maybe next week, there's nothing in the rubric about it sounding nice or being well written. It just doesn't exist. So if you're stressed about the essays, one of the things I guess I'll leave you with is like, you should treat AP essays as a rough draft. Like on test day, every grader understands that you're turning in your rough draft of an essay. In an ideal world, that would be like your really fully fleshed out outline. So in an ideal world, you would like then go home and edit it and make it sound a lot nicer and then turn it into us. But we just don't give you the time to do that. So just keep in mind that even if it's really blunt and you just want to, you don't even have to quantify. You could just say like, well, German aggression caused World War II because they invaded Poland and that started the war. However, there were many other times when European states could have tried to stop Hitler before and they didn't. That's fine too. That's totally fine, right? I mean, you haven't even given it like a quantity or whatever, but you're just saying, well, in this way it did, in this way it didn't. Deal with it, right? And so again, your essays don't have to sound nice. You don't have to have good spelling. Now, all of those things help, right? As someone who grades hundreds of essays every year, like, it is very helpful if it is well organized, well written, put together. It's just easier for me to give you points and find your information. But if you're stressed, like you're not good at spelling, or you feel like you're not great at writing, or English is your second language, whatever, like just know that the graders take all of that into account, and they just want to see what you know, right? So we do our best to figure out like, what is this person talking about? And if it's true, then we're like, great. Okay. All right, that's where I'm going to pause. I'm going to scroll for one more second just to see any tips on how to stay focused. Divide up your time. Like, your brain is not meant to stay focused on something for longer than like 30 minutes. So find some incentive for yourself. I will say two things. Find an incentive for yourself. So say, okay, you know what? I'm going to pull up the CED and I'm going to work my way through topics 1.1 and 1.2. And once I've done those two, I'm going to watch an episode of The Office. And then when that's done, I'm going to go and do 1.3 to 1.5, this next page. And then when I've done that, I'm going to watch another episode. Like, that actually is good for your brain, right? What is not good for your brain is to say, I'm going to cram for 10 hours and then I'm going to like zone out for the next 3 days. That's not healthy. But coming up with some sort of like system is actually good. The second thing is that your brain will stay more engaged if you're actively doing something. So if you are like just staring at your notes, you're going to lose. I mean, that's so boring. So boring. Like, you're going to lose track. But if instead you're looking at your notes and you have the CED printed out and you're like, oh, I'm annotating. So I'm going to go in and try to find stuff from my notes that I could add off to the side over here about these different civilizations. Now you're being active, and that all of a sudden makes you more focused. And so I do have, again, on my website, I have some like packets that you can use. I have some like review packets that give you like charts and tables that you can try to fill out. Just really simple things to like help you kind of organize yourself. Because again, if you're trying to be active, then if you're being active, if you're moving, if you're talking, like get with a friend and talk it through, right? You can pull up the CED that again is on my website. Thank you, Kami, for posting that. It's on my website if you want it. But even if you want to get with a friend and use this as a quizzing thing, say, hey, okay, best friend, tell me about Europe being politically fragmented and characterized by decentralized monarchies, feudalism, and the manorial system. And then your friend can like talk it out for a few minutes. Be like, okay, I remember this and this and this and this. And like, if you're talking, if you're writing, if you're doing something, that's going to help you focus and that's going to help you remember things better. All of this is from brain science. And I didn't study it, but I trust the science. And I know that it's true. So, okay. So go to antisocialstudies.org. You can click AP World History. There's a little tab underneath it that says exam resources. I've made for you practice DBQs. So I have 3 full practice DBQs up there that I created, so you've never seen them before. And if you have to join my Patreon, but it's just $1. There's a reason I do it. I'm not money hungry. You can get an annotated DBQ. So like if you go to my website, you'll see there's a sample DBQ, and then you can get actually where I've written a quote unquote perfect DBQ, like that gets every single point on the rubric, and I've annotated it. I've been like, this sentence is context. This phrase is evidence. This is complexity. And so again, those are really helpful. I've done it for SAQs as well. I have a few of those, and I'm going to be working on LEQs over the next few weeks. So on my website, I have a lot of resources. Most of them are free. Anything that's behind my Patreon, like you have to join my Patreon, I want y'all to know, because you're students and I don't feel good about charging you money. Just know the only reason I do that is just so that it's harder for you to cheat. Like if your teacher wants to assign you one of my sample DBQs, I want to have a record of who has my sample, so that if your teacher's like, I'm pretty sure my student just copy and pasted your thing, I can have some sort of record. So it's literally $1. So I'm not getting rich off of it, but that way I have a like trail of who has my keys and that sort of thing. So again, go check all that out. Go follow me on TikTok. I'm posting at least 1 video a day. Follow me on Instagram, and then subscribe to my YouTube channel, because again, we're doing this every Wednesday from 8 to 9. I'm going to be here live, hopefully answering your questions, making you feel hopefully a little bit better about the AP exam. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. Really, the fact that y'all are here a month and a half before the exam means y'all are in the right spot, and like you care and you're willing to put in the work. So if you are super stressed about this test, don't be. I promise you're going to be fine. At the end of the day, like it's an icing on the cake, right? If you pass this test and get college credit, that's awesome. If you don't, it really is not that big of a deal. I promise. Like it's really not. So don't lose sleep over it. Okay. All right. Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate it. And I'm very welcome. Thank you. It's every Wednesday at 9 Eastern, 8 Central. Every Wednesday. I would call them WAP Wednesday, but Cardi B ruined that. So we're calling them AP World with a W Wednesday. I'm going to be live on YouTube. I'll do other lives on TikTok and Instagram as well, but this is my set one every single week. Thank you. Y'all are great. Like, please don't stress about it. Message me if you have questions. Bye, y'all. Now I have to figure out how to end this thing. Oh God, technology is so terrible. Bye.